Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, a special prayer for my beautiful family. Dear Heavenly Father, with a heart full of gratitude, I lift up my beautiful family to you. Surround us with your love, shield us from harm, and fill our lives with peace and joy. May our hearts always remain kind, our spirits strong, and our path guided by your light. Let love be our foundation and faith our strength. Amen. I want to share something with you. Last night, I slipped on the floor and got some injuries, but don't worry, I received medical treatment and am feeling a little better now. Please keep me in your prayers. Sometimes when happiness arrives, evil waits in the shadows. But no matter what, our faith and love will always keep us strong. My beautiful family, my precious diamonds, please tell me, are you all doing well? I hope you're safe, happy, and surrounded by love. Let me know in the comments. I always want to hear from you. Today's story is a bit longer because it's going to be a blockbuster. I worked very hard on it. Are you present? Comment, present. Is every member of my family here? Are you enjoying my stories? Let's begin with love. The hollow knock echoed through Zanele Deon's modest home for the third time that day. She froze at her kitchen table, pen suspended over the checkbook as she attempted to perform financial miracles with numbers that refused to cooperate. At 20 years old, the weight of impossible debt pressed down on her slender shoulders. "Miss Dion, I know you're in there." The voice belonged to Mr. Patterson from First Capital Finance. "Your father's debt doesn't disappear just because he did." The cruel words cut through the thin door, making Zanele wince. 3 weeks had passed since they'd lowered her father's casket into the ground, a man who had destroyed himself with alcohol after her mother's death. The funeral home had barely finished sending their bill before creditors began circling like vultures. The electric company threatened disconnection in 48 hours. Water service had already been restricted to a trickle. The mortgage, she couldn't even bear to open that envelope. Her father had remortgaged their modest home so many times that the payments had become impossible on her meager salary. Her phone vibrated against the stack of bills. Maya's name illuminated the screen, her only friend who hadn't disappeared when her father's alcoholism became town gossip. "Any luck with the job hunt?" Maya's text read. "None," Zanele typed back. "Nobody's hiring, at least nobody who'll pay enough." 3 dots appeared, then, "Check your email. Found something on a private job board. Pays crazy good, but unusual." Zanele opened her email to find a forwarded listing. Live-in caretaker needed for CEO. Private accommodation and meals provided. $8,000 monthly. Experience preferred, but will train right candidate. Her heart raced at the figure. $8,000 monthly could clear her father's debts within a year. But caretaker. She had no experience beyond caring for her father during his worst benders. The distinctive slap of an official envelope hitting her floor through the mail slot interrupted her thoughts. With trembling fingers, she retrieved and tore it open. Notice of foreclosure and eviction. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Investigation into fraudulent loan applications. 30 days to vacate premises. The FBI, her father's desperation, had evidently pushed him beyond merely borrowing. "I'll call now," she responded to Maya, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number in the listing. A crisp, professional voice answered, "Micah Residence." "I'm calling about the caretaker position," Zanele said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "The position requires utmost discretion and professionalism," the woman stated coldly. "Mr. Micah values his privacy above all else." "I understand." Zanele closed her eyes. "I'm very discreet." "Experience? I cared for my father during his illness." Not entirely a lie. Alcoholism was a disease, after all. "Full name and address for background check." Zanele provided her details, heart sinking at the mention of a background check. Would they discover the FBI investigation? The next morning, a tall, immaculately dressed woman arrived at her door. "Elena Winters, private secretary to Mr. Micah. May I come in?" "Our background check revealed your situation," Elena said without preamble after surveying Zanelle's modest living room. "The debts and legal complications." Zanelle's hope crumbled. "I understand. Thank you for—" "Mr. Micah is willing to overlook these issues, provided you pass a personal interview today." 2 hours later, Zanelle sat in the back of a sleek black car with tinted windows, watching her neighborhood disappear as they drove toward the wealthy coastline district. They passed through massive gates into an estate that seemed to stretch forever. Finally, stopping before a modernist mansion of glass and stone, after signing a non-disclosure agreement and surrendering her phone, Elena led her through marble hallways to a set of massive double doors. "Mr. Micah values honesty above all else," Elena said, hand on the doorknob. "He will know if you lie." Zanelle stepped forward, expecting an elderly man. Instead, she found herself looking at a man who couldn't be more than 30, seated in a high-tech wheelchair by floor-to-ceiling windows. He turned, and Zanelle felt her breath catch. Zane Micah was, without question, the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Strong jawline, penetrating dark eyes, broad shoulders. Despite being confined to the wheelchair, every inch of him radiated power and authority. "Miss Dayon." His voice was deep, with an edge that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. "You believe yourself qualified to be my caretaker?" "I don't know what qualified means in this context," she answered honestly, "but I know I need this job more than anyone else who applied." "Need is dangerous," he said, wheeling closer. "It makes people do things they later regret." "Regret is a luxury for people who have choices," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. He studied her for a long moment. "Elena tells me the FBI is giving you 30 days before they take your home." "You investigated me." "I investigate everyone who enters my home." He leaned forward. "Your father borrowed nearly $250,000 from 14 different individuals and institutions. He falsified loan applications using forged documents." "I'm not my father," she said quietly but firmly. "No," he agreed. "Your credit history shows pathological responsibility. You've worked 3 jobs to put yourself through community college while caring for him. You haven't purchased anything beyond necessities in over 2 years. You're a virgin." The last observation made her gasp. "How could you possibly—" "No gynecological visits, no contraceptive prescriptions, no dating app subscriptions, no overnight stays recorded on your phone's location data that couldn't be explained by work." He spoke as if reciting a shopping list. "Your digital footprint tells a story of self-denial and sacrifice." Zanelle felt naked, exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical nakedness. "Is this how you treat all job applicants, like specimens under a microscope?" For the first time, something genuine crossed his face. Amusement. "Only the interesting ones," he replied. "And you, Miss Dion, are interesting." He pressed a button on his wheelchair, and Elena appeared instantly in the doorway. "Show Miss Dion to the suite where she'll stay during her probationary week," he instructed. Zanelle remained rooted to the spot. "I haven't accepted anything yet." Zane's dark eyes held hers. "But you will. We both know you have nowhere else to go." The truth of his words burned, but Zanelle lifted her chin. "If I stay, Mr. Micah, it will be because I choose to, not because I'm trapped." "We're all trapped in one way or another, Miss Dion," he replied softly. "The difference is merely in the quality of our cages." Chapter 2. The Mansion's Master. Zanelle stood frozen under Zane Micah's penetrating gaze. The setting sun streamed through the massive windows behind him, casting his silhouette in dramatic relief while leaving his expression in shadow. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice deceptively soft. Do you believe yourself qualified? Zanele swallowed hard. Honestly, Mr. Micah, I don't know what qualifications you require. A hint of surprise flickered across his face. Honesty. Interesting approach. He wheeled himself closer, emerging from the shadows. Scars traced one side of his face, somehow enhancing rather than diminishing his striking features. Most candidates arrive with rehearsed speeches about their nursing credentials. I don't have nursing credentials, Zanele admitted, but I learn quickly, I work hard, and I desperately need this job. Desperation isn't a qualification, he countered, circling her like a predator. It's a liability. Or motivation, she responded without thinking. His wheelchair stopped abruptly. You speak your mind. Elena didn't mention that. From the doorway, Elena cleared her throat. Shall I show her out, sir? No. His eyes never left Zanele's face. The previous 5 candidates were qualified on paper but couldn't look me in the eye. Miss Dion at least doesn't pity me. He gestured to the chair opposite his. Sit. Zanele obeyed, perching on the edge of the leather chair. My requirements are simple, he continued. Complete discretion, unwavering loyalty, physical assistance with certain tasks. You will live here, with 1 day off weekly. You will have no personal life outside these walls for the duration of your employment. For how long? She asked. Until I decide otherwise. Zanele frowned. That's rather open-ended. You're free to decline. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I believe the FBI gives 30 days before eviction. I'm not my father, she said quietly. No, he agreed. Your credit history, limited as it is, shows pathological responsibility. You worked 3 jobs to put yourself through community college while caring for him. Zanele felt uncomfortably exposed. If you know all this, why interview me at all? Because numbers don't reveal character. He pressed a button on his wheelchair. Elena will show you the quarters where you'll stay during your probationary week. After that, if we both agree to continue, you'll sign a formal contract. Elena appeared instantly at the door. This way, Miss Dion. Zanele stood, hesitating. What exactly will my duties include, Mr. Micah? Everything. His answer was simple but loaded with unspoken implications. Elena will provide details. As they walked through the mansion's winding corridors, Zanele's mind reeled. The building itself was a contradiction, architecturally modern yet filled with priceless antiques. Security cameras watched from every angle. Mr. Micah requires assistance with daily activities, Elena explained clinically. Bathing, dressing, transportation. You'll manage his medication schedule, accompany him to physical therapy, and ensure his comfort. What happened to him? Zanele asked. Elena's steps faltered momentarily. That's his story to share if he chooses. They arrived at a door that Elena unlocked with a keycard. Your quarters during probation. Zanele gasped as they entered. Quarters was a gross understatement for what was essentially a luxury apartment within the mansion. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean, a king-sized bed dominated one wall, and a bathroom bigger than Zanele's entire living room gleamed with marble and gold fixtures. This is excessive, she whispered. Mr. Micah believes living conditions affect performance, Elena replied. Your schedule. She handed Zanele a tablet. You begin tomorrow at 6 a.m. Tonight. Familiarize yourself with his medication regimen and care protocols. When Eleanor left, Zanele sank onto the bed, overwhelmed. The tablet contained hundreds of pages detailing Zane's care, medications, physical therapy exercises, dietary restrictions, emergency protocols. The clinical descriptions painted a picture of a man in constant pain, managing complications from catastrophic injuries. At precisely 6 a.m. the next morning, Zanele knocked on Zane's bedroom door as instructed. Enter, came his clipped response. She stepped into a room 3 times the size of hers, dominated by a massive bed where Zane lay propped against pillows. Despite the early hour, he was already alert, reading from a tablet. "Good morning, Mr. Micah," she greeted him, fighting to keep her voice steady. Elena emerged from an adjoining bathroom. "First, medications." She pointed to a tray with precisely arranged pills and a glass of water. "Then transfer to the chair for morning hygiene." Under Elena's critical eye, Zanele helped Zane take his medications, noting his grimace of discomfort as he swallowed each pill. The next task, transferring him from bed to wheelchair, proved more challenging. "Support his lower back," Elena instructed sharply. "His right side bears more weight than his left." Zanele struggled with the mechanics, painfully aware of Zane's rigid body and tightly controlled expression as they maneuvered him into the chair. Once settled, he released a breath she hadn't realized he'd been holding. "You'll need to build upper body strength," he observed coolly. "I've arranged for you to train with my physical therapist. Until then, use proper body mechanics or you'll injure us both." The morning routine continued with Elena demonstrating each procedure, washing, shaving, dressing, while Zanele observed. The intimacy of these tasks made her acutely uncomfortable, a fact Zane seemed to note with grim amusement. "Having second thoughts, Miss Dayon?" he asked, as Elena helped him into a tailored shirt. "No," she replied, though the lie was transparent even to her own ears. "Honesty, remember?" His eyes caught hers. "This is the reality of the position. If you find it too distasteful, say so now." Zanele squared her shoulders. "It's not distasteful, Mr. Micah. It's intimate. There's a difference." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. "Indeed there is." Chapter 3. Pride and Professionalism. Days turned into weeks as Zanele settled into the demanding rhythm of caring for Zane Micah. The mansion's opulence no longer distracted her, and the complex medical routines had become second nature. Each morning began at 5:30 with medications and hygiene, followed by breakfast and physical therapy. Afternoons were dedicated to business, as Zane conducted virtual meetings from his home office while she attended to his needs, anticipating requirements before he voiced them. "Water, Miss Dayon," he said during a particularly lengthy video conference with Tokyo investors. She was already placing a glass within reach, earning a raised eyebrow of approval. The subtle acknowledgement shouldn't have pleased her as much as it did. Yet she'd come to value these small signs that her efforts met his exacting standards. Unlike her father, whose drunken criticism had been as predictable as it was cruel, Zane's approval was rare enough to be meaningful. On this particular morning, 3 weeks into her employment, Zanele was organizing Zane's medications when Eleanor entered the medical supply room without knocking. "Mr. Micah requires you immediately," she announced, her perpetual disapproval seemingly intensified. "A situation has developed." Zanele hurried to Zane's office to find him staring intently at multiple screens displaying security camera feeds. His jaw was tight with controlled anger. "There's been a breach," he stated without looking up. "Someone attempted to access restricted areas of the property last night." "Shouldn't we call the police?" Zanele asked, scanning the screens. "The police are notoriously ineffective at addressing privacy concerns of public figures," he replied, finally turning to face her. "Besides, I believe this was an attempt by a particular tabloid journalist who's been pursuing me since the accident." His expression darkened. "They're not seeking corporate secrets, Miss Dayon. They want photographs of my condition. Apparently, fallen titan confined to wheelchair stories still generate significant ad revenue." The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, revealing a vulnerability Zanele hadn't witnessed before. Without thinking, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He stiffened at her touch, but didn't pull away. Your sympathy is unnecessary. Your discretion, however, is paramount. From now on, you are not to discuss anything about my condition or treatment with anyone outside this house. Not your friend Maya, not anyone. I signed an NDA, she reminded him. I haven't spoken to anyone. Good. See that it remains that way. He abruptly changed topics. I've reviewed your performance for the probationary period. Elena believes you lack the experience needed for this position. Zanelle's heart sank. Despite her efforts, she'd expected this outcome. 3 weeks of relative financial security had been a blessing, but hardly enough to address her father's debts. However, Zane continued, observing her reaction, I find your adaptability and attention to detail adequate. The position is yours permanently, should you wish to accept. Yes, she stammered, caught off guard by the unexpected offer. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. His lips quirked in that almost smile she'd come to recognize. The compensation will increase to 10,000 monthly, with performance bonuses at my discretion. But so will the responsibilities. Later that afternoon, Zanelle discovered what those expanded responsibilities entailed when Zane's physical therapist failed to arrive for their scheduled session. Magnus has the flu, Zane informed her, already positioned in the mansion's state-of-the-art therapy room. You'll conduct today's session. But I've only observed, she protested. I'm not qualified to... You've been studying the protocols for weeks, he interrupted. I'm not asking you to innovate, merely to follow established procedures. What if I hurt you? You won't, he stated with absolute certainty. You're too cautious by nature. The session proved more challenging than she anticipated. Zane pushed himself relentlessly, insisting on completing every exercise despite obvious pain. Sweat soaked through his shirt as he gripped the parallel bars, forcing his legs to bear weight they hadn't been designed to support after the accident. Mr. Micah, perhaps we should continue, he commanded through gritted teeth, his knuckles white from exertion. The protocol says 10 repetitions. You've done 15. The protocol is a baseline, not a limitation. When his legs finally buckled, Zanelle was there to catch him, supporting his weight as they both sank to the padded floor. For several heartbeats, she held him, feeling the tremors running through his overtaxed muscles, the ragged rhythm of his breathing against her neck. Enough, she said firmly. You've done enough today. To her surprise, he didn't argue. Instead, he remained in her arms a moment longer than necessary before shifting away. You're stronger than you look, he observed, allowing her to help him back into the wheelchair. Farm girl, she explained, adjusting the footrests. Before we moved to the city, I used to help my father with the livestock. You never mentioned growing up on a farm. You never asked. Something shifted in his expression, curiosity perhaps. What else haven't I asked, I wonder? The question lingered between them, opening possibilities neither seemed ready to explore. That evening, during his therapeutic bath, Zanelle found the courage to ask a question that had been troubling her since discovering the security breach. Mr. Micah, why are you so determined to keep your condition private? The accident wasn't your fault. Steam rose around them as she carefully monitored the water temperature. Zane's eyes remained closed, his head resting against the bath pillow. Privacy isn't about fault, Miss Dion. It's about perception. His voice was low, almost contemplative. The business world respects power. The moment I became an object of pity, I began losing that respect. Is that why your family stopped visiting? Because they pitied you? His eyes snapped open, fixing her with a cold stare. Who told you my family stopped visiting? Elena mentioned it, Zanelle replied, instantly regretting the admission. I apologize for the intrusion. A long silence stretched between them before Zane finally spoke. My parents died when I was 16. Car accident. The family Elena referred to is my former fiancée, Isabel, and my cousin, who serves on the company board. I'm sorry about your parents, Zanele said softly. It was a long time ago. His tone remained detached, but something in his expression had softened. Isabel left 3 weeks after the doctors confirmed my prognosis. Apparently, in sickness and in health, had limitations she hadn't anticipated. That's awful. That's practical, he corrected. She'd signed up to marry a certain version of Zayn Micah. When that version no longer existed, she exercised her right to choose differently. Is that how you see yourself? As a different person now? He studied her thoughtfully. Perceptive question. The world certainly sees me differently. My board of directors speaks more slowly during meetings, as if paralysis might have affected my cognitive abilities. Former colleagues make eye contact with my wheelchair rather than with me. Strangers either stare or deliberately avoid looking altogether. You didn't answer my question, Zanel pointed out. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, I didn't. He shifted slightly, wincing as the movement caused pain. The water's cooling. We're done for tonight. As Zanele helped him from the bath, she couldn't help noticing the extensive scarring along his spine, evidence of multiple surgeries and the catastrophic injury that had changed his life. Despite his physical limitations, his upper body remained powerful, honed by relentless therapy and determination. You've been staring at my scars all week, he observed as she helped him into sleep clothes. Does their appearance disturb you? No, she answered honestly. I was thinking they looked like a map. A map? Of what you've endured, what you've survived. She hesitated, then added, They tell a story of strength, not weakness. For a moment, Zayn seemed genuinely speechless. When he finally responded, his voice held an unfamiliar quality, something almost gentle. An interesting perspective, Miss Dion. Chapter 4. Abandoned and Betrayed. 1 month into her employment, Zanele had mastered most of Zayn's care routines. She moved through the mansion with growing confidence, no longer intimidated by its opulence or the complex medical procedures that structured their days. What she hadn't anticipated was the way professional lines would begin to blur as familiarity grew between them. The morning had begun like any other. Medications at 5:30, followed by breakfast and physical therapy. After helping Zayn settle into his office for video conferences, Zanele busied herself with inventory tasks until an unexpected commotion caught her attention. You can't just appear unannounced, Elena's normally controlled voice carried down the hallway. Mr. Micah is in meetings all day. I don't need an appointment to see my own fiancé. A woman's sharp voice cut through Elena's protests. Ex-fiancé, she corrected herself with a bitter laugh. Zanele stepped into the hallway just as a stunning blonde in designer clothing pushed past Elena and strode toward Zayn's office. Their eyes met briefly, the woman's gaze dismissive as it swept over Zanele's simple uniform. Another nurse? She asked Elena with a smirk. How many does he need? Miss Dion is Mr. Micah's personal assistant, Elena replied coldly, and you are trespassing, Miss Montgomery. Isabel Montgomery. The name clicked into place in Zanele's memory, Zayn's former fiancé who had abandoned him after the accident. Before she could process this realization, Zayn's office door opened. I thought I heard your voice, Isabel. His tone was ice, his expression carefully controlled. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? Isabel's demeanor shifted instantly, her angular face softening into practiced contrition. Zayn, darling, you look well. She moved toward him with practiced grace. Can we speak privately? For old time's sake? Something flashed in Zayn's eyes, anger perhaps or pain carefully masked. My office. 5 minutes. That's all you get. For 20 minutes, Muffled voices emanated from behind the closed door, rising and falling in what was clearly a heated exchange. Zanelli tried to focus on her tasks, but concern kept drawing her attention back to the hallway. When the door finally burst open, Isabel emerged, face flushed with anger. "You're still the same arrogant, controlling bastard, wheelchair or not," she shouted over her shoulder. "Some things never change, do they, Zane?" "And you're still transparently opportunistic," Zane replied, wheeling himself into the doorway. "The difference is, I no longer have to pretend otherwise." Isabel stopped abruptly upon noticing Zanelli nearby. Her perfectly made-up face twisted into a contemptuous smile. "Is this one your latest conquest?" She looked Zanelli up and down with deliberate cruelty. "My God, Zane, your standards have certainly changed." "Miss Dion is my personal assistant," Zane stated coldly, "and you are trespassing. Security will escort you out. Don't bother with security, I know the way." Isabel tossed her hair dramatically. "Do yourself a favor, honey," she addressed Zanelli. "Get out while you can. He'll use you up and discard you the moment you're no longer useful." After Isabel's dramatic exit, a heavy silence fell. Zane remained motionless in his wheelchair, his expression unreadable. "I apologize for that scene," he finally said, his voice carefully controlled. "Isabel has always had a flair for melodrama." "No need to apologize," Zanelli replied quietly. "Are you all right?" He looked almost surprised by the question. "I'm fine. Her opinion ceased mattering long ago." But as the day progressed, subtle signs suggested the encounter had affected him more than he admitted. His responses during Dr. Harmon's visit were clipped, his posture more rigid than usual. After the doctor left, Zane retreated to his office, declining dinner with the excuse of work deadlines. At 9 o'clock, concerned by his extended absence, Zanelli knocked on his office door. "Enter," came the terse response. She found him by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his wheelchair positioned to face the darkness outside. An open bottle of expensive scotch sat on the side table, a half-empty glass in his hand. "You missed your evening medication," she said softly. "The medication doesn't mix well with scotch," he replied without turning. "I made a calculated choice." Zanelli approached cautiously. "You also missed dinner." "I wasn't hungry." She studied his reflection in the dark glass. The tight line of his jaw, the controlled stillness that suggested he was holding himself together through sheer willpower. What did she want? Zanelli asked, deciding directness might be better than pretending the earlier confrontation hadn't happened. Zane took a long sip of his scotch before answering. "To assuage her guilt. She's getting married next month. Apparently, her conscience required my blessing." "Did you give it?" A harsh laugh escaped him. "Number, I wished her and Chad all the happiness their shallow, materialistic relationship deserves." Zanelli couldn't help but smile slightly. "I'm sure that went over well. About as well as you'd expect." He finally turned to face her. "She left me 3 weeks after the doctors confirmed my prognosis. Did you know that? 3 weeks, after 5 years together." The pain beneath his anger was palpable, raw, despite the time that had passed. "I'm sorry," Zanelli said simply. "Don't be. It was educational." He refilled his glass with deliberate precision. When you're wealthy and able-bodied, people line up to profess their devotion. The moment one of those qualities changes, you discover what that devotion was truly worth. Not everyone would make that choice. Wouldn't they? He fixed her with an intense gaze. Isabel wasn't alone in her desertion. My closest friends stopped calling after the obligatory hospital visits. Business associates suddenly couldn't find time in their schedules. Even my cousin, my only living relative, began positioning himself to take over the company before I'd completed physical therapy. The bitterness in his voice cut through the dimly lit room. "The accident didn't just break my spine, Zanelli. It shattered the illusion that I was anything more than what I could provide to others." Something in his vulnerability called to her. Without overthinking, Zanele moved closer, resting her hand lightly on his shoulder. "Is that what you think I'm doing? Staying because of what you can provide?" His eyes met hers, searching. "Aren't you? I'm paying your father's debts, keeping you from homelessness. Our arrangement is transparently transactional." "It started that way," she acknowledged, "but that's not why I stay now." "Then why do you?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither had voiced. Before Zanele could formulate a response, Zayn abruptly changed direction. "Tell me about your father," he said, wheeling back to place his glass on the desk. The sudden shift caught her off guard. "My father?" "Yes. You've heard about my disloyal fiancé. Seems only fair I learn about the man whose debts brought you here." Zanele hesitated, unaccustomed to discussing her father with anyone. The wounds were still fresh, the complicated emotions unresolved. "He wasn't always an alcoholic," she began slowly. "Before my mother died, he was different, kind, patient. He taught agriculture at the community college, wrote articles for farming journals. People respected him." She moved to the window, gathering her thoughts as she stared into the darkness. "After Mom's cancer, he just broke. Started drinking to numb the pain, lost his job, borrowed money he couldn't repay. Each time he hit bottom, I thought it couldn't get worse, but it always did." "Yet you stayed," Zayn observed. "Why?" "He was my father." The simple truth carried the weight of years of sacrifice. And sometimes, between the drunken rages and disappearances, I'd catch glimpses of the man he used to be, just enough to keep hoping he might find his way back. But he never did. No. The admission hurt, even now. He died owing everyone in town, the loan sharks, the banks, our neighbors, even my old high school teacher who lent him money for emergency car repairs that went straight to the liquor store. Zanele turned back to face Zayn, surprised to find him watching her with an expression of genuine interest rather than judgment. "You blame yourself," he stated. "Wouldn't you? I should have done more, found better help, been stronger." "One person cannot save another who refuses to be saved," Zayn said quietly. "That burden was never yours to carry." The unexpected compassion in his voice brought tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, unwilling to indulge in self-pity. "Maybe we're not so different," she observed, "both abandoned by people who should have stayed." "Perhaps," he studied her thoughtfully, "though you were abandoned by a man broken by grief, I was abandoned by people driven by self-interest. There's a distinction. The result feels the same." A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with mutual understanding. Finally, Zayn wheeled himself toward the door. "It's late, I should take my medication." "I'll get it," Zanele offered, relieved to return to more familiar territory. As she prepared his evening dose, Zayn surprised her with another question. "The day we met, I noted your digital footprint showed no romantic entanglements. Was that also because of your father?" Zanele handed him the pills and a glass of water before answering. "Partly. Between working multiple jobs and dealing with his episodes, there wasn't much time for dating." She smiled faintly. "Besides, bringing someone home to meet a frequently inebriated father isn't exactly conducive to relationship success." "And now?" His voice remained casual, but his eyes watched her carefully as he swallowed the medication. "Now I live in a mansion with my employer, with one day off every 2 weeks," she replied lightly. "Not exactly prime circumstances for developing a social life." "Point taken." Was that relief in his expression? Before she could analyze it further, he continued, "I've been thinking about your schedule. You should take 2 days off each week moving forward. Elena can cover basic needs." "That's not necessary. I'm fine with... It's not about necessity, he interrupted. It's about sustainability. You need a life beyond these walls, Zanele. The suggestion was unexpected, almost contradictory to his previous insistence on her constant availability. Yet something in his tone suggested the offer wasn't entirely altruistic, as if he were testing her, waiting to see if, given freedom, she would choose to return. "Thank you," she said simply. "I appreciate that." Later, as she helped him prepare for bed, the unusual intimacy of their earlier conversation lingered. The practiced routine of transferring him from wheelchair to bed, adjusting pillows to minimize pressure on sensitive areas, arranging medications for morning, all felt different somehow, charged with unspoken awareness. "Zanele," he said as she turned to leave, "what Isabel said earlier about me using people and discarding them. Is that how you see me?" She paused in the doorway, considering her answer carefully. "I see someone who was hurt and responded by building walls. It's a natural defense mechanism. That doesn't answer my question." "No," she said honestly. "I don't see you that way. I see someone who's afraid to trust because everyone who should have been trustworthy abandoned you when you needed them most." His expression remained guarded, but something in his eyes softened. "Good night, Zanele." "Good night, Zane." As she closed his door and walked to her own quarters, Zanele realized they had crossed an invisible boundary. The carefully maintained professional distance had narrowed, replaced by something more complex and potentially dangerous, for both of them. Chapter 5. The Night of Awakening. The day of Zanele's first full bathing duty arrived with unexpected tension. For 8 weeks, she had assisted with various aspects of Zane's care, but Elena had maintained responsibility for certain intimate procedures, including the complete bathing routine. Now, with Elena on a brief leave to attend her mother's funeral, the task fell to Zanele. "The process is straightforward," Elena had explained during their handover briefing, her tone clinical and detached. "Mr. Micah prefers the therapeutic bath in the evening. Water temperature exactly 102 degrees. Timing precisely 20 minutes to prevent autonomic dysreflexia." "I understand the medical procedures," Zanele had assured her. "I've been studying the protocols." Elena's expression had remained skeptical. "Technical knowledge isn't the only consideration. Maintaining professional boundaries is essential. Mr. Micah may be your employer, but in these moments, he is also your patient." The warning had seemed unnecessary at the time. After all, Zanele had already assisted with numerous intimate care tasks. Yet as evening approached, she found herself uncharacteristically nervous. Something about this particular duty felt different, more intimate, more consequential. "Stop overthinking," she muttered to herself as she prepared the bathroom, checking water temperature and arranging towels with excessive precision. "It's just another medical procedure." But when Zane arrived for his evening routine, something in his demeanor suggested he shared her awareness of the shift in their dynamic. His usual composed expression seemed slightly strained, his posture more rigid than normal. "Everything prepared?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes, water temperature is exactly 102 as requested." Zanele kept her tone professional, focusing on practical details. "Do you want to begin now, or would you prefer a few minutes to review your emails first?" "Now is fine." He wheeled himself to the transfer bench, positioned beside the large therapeutic tub. "I assume Elena explained the procedure." "In detail," Zanele confirmed, moving to assist with the transfer. "I understand the protocols." The practiced routine of helping him from wheelchair to bath bench proceeded smoothly, but as Zanele reached to unbutton his shirt, her fingers faltered momentarily. Zane noticed, of course. He missed nothing. Having second thoughts? He asked quietly. No, she replied, resuming the task with deliberate composure. Just want to make sure I do this correctly. You've been helping with my care for almost 2 months, Zanele. This isn't fundamentally different, but it was, and they both knew it. As she helped remove his shirt, revealing the powerful torso that physical therapy had maintained despite his paralysis, Zanele felt a shift in the atmosphere, something electric that had nothing to do with medical procedures. She focused on the technical aspects, keeping her expression professionally neutral as she assisted with removing his remaining clothing and transferring him into the warm water. Once settled, Zayn leaned back against the specially designed bath pillow, his eyes closing briefly as the therapeutic warmth began working on perpetually tense muscles. The water temperature is acceptable, Zanele asked, reaching for the specialized soap. Perfect, he replied, opening his eyes to study her. You seem tense. I'm fine. She began washing his shoulders and arms with methodical care, just concentrating on following the proper procedure. Elena's influence, he observed with a hint of amusement. She believes in protocols for everything. I sometimes wonder if she has a written procedure for breathing. The gentle joke eased some of the tension, allowing Zanele to relax slightly as she continued the bathing process. She worked efficiently, focusing on the medical aspects rather than the man before her. Yet she couldn't help noticing details she'd been professionally ignoring for weeks. The precise contours of muscle beneath her hands, the contrast between his olive skin and her darker fingers, the way his breathing changed subtly when she touched certain areas. You're gentle, he commented unexpectedly. Elena is efficient but clinical. Is that a problem? Zanele asked, pausing momentarily. On the contrary. Something in his voice had softened. It's a welcome change. She continued working down his arms to his hands, carefully cleaning between each finger. When she reached his left hand, she noticed a pale line encircling his ring finger. Isabel's ring, he explained, following her gaze. The tan line is finally fading. How long were you engaged? Zanele asked, surprising herself with the personal question. 14 months. Together for 5 years before that. His expression remained carefully neutral. Enough time to believe I knew her character. Evidently not. People reveal who they truly are during crises, Zanele said softly. Not when everything is perfect. His eyes met hers, searching. A lesson you learned with your father? Among others. She moved to wash his chest, maintaining professional focus despite the increasing intimacy of the task. My mother always said you never really know someone until you've seen them handle loss or failure. Success masks character flaws, hardship reveals them. Your mother sounds wise. She was. Zanele smiled faintly at the memory. Practical, no nonsense, but kind. She would have handled my father's alcoholism better than I did. Set boundaries. Demanded accountability. Yet you stayed with him until the end, Zayn observed. Despite the cost to yourself. He was my father. Family doesn't abandon family. The words emerged with more passion than she'd intended, and she knew immediately that Zayn had caught the unintentional rebuke to those who had abandoned him. Some would call that misplaced loyalty, he said quietly. Maybe. She moved to his back, gently washing the scarred skin with careful attention. But I prefer misplaced loyalty to calculated desertion. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotion. Zanele continued her task, working down to wash his legs where sensation ended. She handled the paralyzed portions of his body with the same careful attention she'd given to the rest, a fact that didn't escape Zayn's notice. Most people rush through this part, he observed, watching her hands move with gentle efficiency. As if the absence of sensation makes it less worthy of care. The absence of sensation doesn't mean the absence of dignity, she replied simply. Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps, or appreciation. For a moment, the professional distance between them seemed to narrow, replaced by a connection that transcended their roles as employer and caretaker. "Time to rinse," Zanele said, breaking the moment before it could deepen further. She used the handheld shower to carefully rinse away the soap, then prepared to help him from the bath. The transfer from tub to bench required physical closeness, her arms supporting his weight as water streamed from his body. She reached for a towel, but before she could begin drying him, Zane's hand caught her wrist. "Zanel." His voice had changed, grown deeper somehow. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to his, finding an intensity there that sent heat rushing through her body. For an endless moment, they remained frozen in that position. Her hand suspended with the towel, his fingers warm around her wrist, their faces close enough that she could feel his breath against her skin. "This isn't in Elena's protocol," he said softly. "What isn't?" she whispered, though she knew exactly what he meant. This moment, this tension, this unspoken possibility hovering between them. Instead of answering, Zane released her wrist, only to raise his hand to her face. His fingers traced the curve of her cheek with exquisite gentleness, then slid to the nape of her neck. The touch sent electricity racing down her spine. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. "Tell me this is inappropriate and I'll never mention it again." Zanele knew she should say exactly that, should re-establish the professional boundaries that had already blurred dangerously, yet the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her body making a decision her mind seemed unwilling to articulate. The first brush of his lips against hers was tentative, questioning. When she didn't pull away, his kiss deepened, becoming more assured, more demanding. Zanele responded with surprising urgency, her hands moving to frame his face as months of denied attraction crystallized into this single electric moment. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Zane studied her face with an expression she'd never seen before. Vulnerability mixed with desire, uncertainty with determination. "This complicates things," he said quietly. "Yes." She couldn't deny the obvious. "It does. Do you regret it?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither had previously dared acknowledge. Zanele considered her answer carefully, aware that her response would irreversibly alter their relationship. "No," she finally said, her voice steady despite the chaos of emotions within her. "I don't regret it." Relief flickered across his features before his habitual control reasserted itself. "We should finish the procedure. You're still learning the protocols." The deliberate return to professional language might have seemed cold if not for the warmth that remained in his eyes, the slight curve of his lips that suggested this was merely a pause, not an ending. Zanele completed the bathing routine with heightened awareness of every touch, every shared glance. The clinical nature of the task had been irrevocably transformed by what had passed between them. As she helped him dress in sleep clothes, their fingers brushed with new significance, sending small currents of electricity through her body. "Will you stay?" Zane asked as she prepared to leave his bedroom after completing the evening routine. The question was simple, but layered with meaning. "Is that what you want?" she countered softly. "I wouldn't ask otherwise." His gaze was direct, unwavering. "But I need you to be certain, Zanele. This isn't part of your job description." "I know." She moved closer, drawn by something stronger than professional obligation or gratitude. "I'm not staying because it's my job." The kiss that followed was deeper than the first, unleashing a hunger that surprised them both. Zane pulled her down beside him on the bed, his hands moving with skilled precision despite his physical limitations. What his body couldn't do, his hands and mouth compensated for with devastating effectiveness. I've wanted this since the day you walked into my office, he admitted between kisses. Even then, something about you called to me. I was terrified of you that day, Zanele confessed, laughing softly against his neck. And now, his eyes searched hers. Now, I'm terrified of how much I want you. The honesty of her answer seemed to break something open between them. What followed was a discovery of each other's bodies. Zanele learning the geography of Zane's scars and sensations, the precise boundaries where feeling ended, the surprising sensitivity of areas above his injury. Zane, in turn, explored her with focused attention that suggested he was memorizing every curve, every response, every sound she made. Despite his physical limitations, Zane proved himself a passionate and attentive lover, using his considerable upper body strength to position himself in ways that allowed him to pleasure her thoroughly. When Zanele reached the height of pleasure for the second time, crying out his name against his shoulder, the triumph in his expression was unmistakable. "You're beautiful," he murmured afterward, watching her face in the dim light of his bedroom. "Even more so when you let go of that careful control you always maintain." Zanele lay beside him, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. The intimacy of the moment, a closeness that went beyond the physical act they'd shared, was both exhilarating and terrifying. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That depends." His fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "What do you want to happen?" The question was deceptively simple. What did she want? To continue this unexpected relationship that had developed between them, to return to the safety of their professional roles. Neither option seemed fully possible now that they had crossed this line. "I want ... She hesitated, searching for words that could encompass the complexity of her feelings. "I want this not to be a mistake we both regret tomorrow." Zane's hand stilled on her shoulder. "Do you think it is a mistake?" "No," she answered honestly. "But I'm afraid you might. Why would I? Because I'm your employee, because I'm nothing like the women in your world, because my father died a penniless alcoholic and yours probably owned half of Seattle." The bitter truth of their differences hung between them, impossible to ignore despite the intimacy they'd just shared. "My father was a first-generation immigrant who built a tech company from nothing," Zane said quietly. "My mother taught public school until the day she died. Their car accident happened when they were driving back from serving meals at a homeless shelter, a monthly tradition they maintained even after the company went public." The revelation surprised her. "I didn't know. Few people do. It doesn't fit the narrative of the privileged heir that financial magazines prefer." His fingers resumed their gentle exploration of her skin. "As for you being my employee, yes, that complicates things. But I'm not interested in power dynamics, Zanele. I've had enough people in my life who wanted something from me. What happened tonight wasn't about your job or my position." "Then what was it about?" His answer was simple but profound. "Connection. Something I thought I'd never find again after the accident." In those words, Zanele heard the echo of her own loneliness, the isolation she'd experienced while caring for her father, the walls she'd built to protect herself from further hurt. Somehow, against all probability, they had recognized in each other a kindred spirit. Chapter 6. The Proposition. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow across the rumpled sheets. Zanele traced lazy patterns on Zane's chest, her mind still processing the seismic shift in their relationship. What had begun as a purely professional arrangement had evolved into something neither had anticipated, yet both had clearly wanted. "You're thinking too loudly," Zane murmured, his eyes still closed. "I can practically hear the gears turning." "Just contemplating how quickly things change," she replied, resting her chin on his shoulder. Yesterday I was your caretaker. Today you're still my caretaker, he corrected gently, among other things. The simple acknowledgement of their dual relationship brought reality crashing back. Zanele sat up, suddenly aware of the time. Your morning medications. They're late. She moved to get up, but Zane caught her wrist. They can wait 20 minutes, he said. This conversation can't. Something in his tone made her pause. What conversation? Zane pushed himself into a sitting position, arranging pillows behind his back with practiced efficiency. The casual domesticity of the gesture contrasted sharply with the intensity of his expression. We need to discuss what happens now, he said. Last night changed things between us, but it doesn't change your situation. Your father's debts still exist. The FBI investigation into his fraudulent loans continues. Your home remains in foreclosure. The clinical recitation of her problems felt like a bucket of cold water. Are you regretting what happened? No, he answered immediately, but I refuse to pretend this isn't complicated. Zanele pulled the sheet around herself, suddenly feeling exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical nakedness. I'm not expecting you to solve my problems, Zane. What happened between us wasn't about my financial situation. I know. His expression softened. That's precisely why I want to make you a proposition. A proposition, she repeated cautiously. He reached for her hand, his touch unexpectedly gentle for a man whose business dealings were reportedly ruthless. I'll clear all of your father's debts, every penny, the mortgage, the personal loans, even the gambling debts I suspect you don't know about yet. Zanelli's heart raced, the offer too generous to be without conditions. In exchange for what? Stay with me, he said simply, not as my caretaker, but as my companion. Your companion, she echoed, trying to understand the full implications of his offer. Yes. His gaze never wavered. Continue living here, sharing my life, my bed. No more uniforms, no more formal schedules. Elena can handle the medical aspects of my care. The proposition hung between them, tempting yet troubling. That sounds like you're offering to what? He challenged. Pay you for sex. That's not what this is, Zanele. Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're offering to buy me. Hurt flashed across his face before his expression closed. Is that what you think of me? That I'd reduce what happened between us to a transaction? No, she admitted, regret immediate. But you have to understand how it sounds. I'll pay your debts if you stay in my bed. Zane released her hand, creating physical distance that mirrored the emotional gulf opening between them. Perhaps I phrased it poorly. I'm not offering a quid pro quo arrangement, Zanele. I'm offering to remove the financial pressure that brought you here so we can explore what's developing between us without that shadow hanging over everything. Put that way, the offer seemed less transactional, more considerate, yet Zanele couldn't shake her discomfort. Why not just continue as we are? I work for you. We see where this relationship goes naturally, and I handle my father's debts on my own. Because that arrangement has a significant power imbalance, he replied with characteristic directness. I'd remain your employer, with authority over your livelihood. That's not a healthy foundation for whatever this is becoming. His logic was undeniable, yet the solution he proposed created its own set of problems. And being financially indebted to you creates less of a power imbalance. Frustration flickered across his features. What would you suggest then? That I ignore your financial difficulties, pretend I don't have the resources to solve problems that are causing you constant stress? I'm not asking you to ignore anything, Zanele paused, struggling to articulate her concerns. I don't want to be another person who's with you because of what you can provide. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Like Isabel. Yes, she admitted quietly. Exactly like Isabel. Zane was silent for a long moment, considering her words. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened. Your concern honors you, but there's a fundamental difference between you and Isabel, Zanelle. She wanted my resources without caring about me. You care about me despite my resources. The simple truth of his observation settled between them, creating space for compromise. What if, Zanelle suggested carefully, you help with the debts as an advance on my salary? I'll continue working for you professionally, but without the conflict of also being involved with you personally. An interesting proposal, he acknowledged, but it still leaves us in an employer-employee relationship. Then hire someone else for the medical care. Keep me on for, I don't know, administrative duties. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Are you negotiating with me, Zanelle Deon? I'm trying to find a solution we can both live with, she replied honestly. One that doesn't make me feel purchased, but also addresses your concerns about power dynamics. Zane reached for her again, pulling her closer until their foreheads nearly touched. You continue to surprise me, he murmured. Most people would have simply accepted the offer of financial salvation without questioning the implications. I'm not most people. No, he agreed, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. You're not, which is precisely why I want you in my life as more than an employee. The tenderness in his touch contrasted with the business-like discussion they'd been having, reminding Zanelle of the complex man behind the proposition, a man capable of clinical analysis and raw vulnerability in equal measure. Here's my counter-offer, Zane said after a thoughtful pause. I'll clear your father's debts, but as a proper loan, with reasonable terms and documentation. You'll continue official employment in a modified capacity, perhaps overseeing the Micah Foundation's community initiatives, a position you're uniquely qualified for given your experience with addiction issues. The thoughtful compromise acknowledged her concerns while creating a framework that could accommodate their evolving relationship. That could work, Zanelle admitted. Our personal relationship would remain private but not secret, he continued. Elena will know, of course, as will anyone else who regularly enters our shared spaces. But it wouldn't be fodder for public speculation. And if it doesn't work out between us, Zanelle asked, voicing the question that needed addressing, what happens to the loan? To my job? Both would remain secure, he answered without hesitation. The loan terms wouldn't change, and your professional position would be protected by a proper contract with specific termination clauses. I'm a businessman, Zanelle. I understand the importance of clear parameters, especially in complex situations. The thoroughness of his response suggested he'd been considering these issues longer than just this morning. You've thought about this, she observed. Since the moment I realized my feelings for you had evolved beyond professional appreciation, he admitted. I don't make decisions impulsively, especially not ones with significant personal implications. Zanelle took a deep breath, considering the revised proposition. The arrangement would maintain her dignity while addressing the practical concerns that had originally brought her to the mansion. Most importantly, it acknowledged that what had developed between them was worth preserving, worth the complications it would inevitably create. I have conditions, she said finally. Zane's eyebrow arched with interest. I'm listening. First, the loan agreement has to be fair, proper market interest rates, reasonable payment schedule, no hidden forgiveness clauses or generous terms that make it effectively a gift. Done. He agreed readily. Though I should warn you that proper market rates for someone in your financial situation would be considerably higher than what I'll offer. I'm not a predatory lender. Fine. Second, my new position needs to be legitimate, real responsibilities, appropriate salary for the role, not a made-up title that's essentially a sinecure. The foundation actually needs someone with your perspective, Zane replied. Our addiction recovery initiatives are well funded but poorly executed due to lack of first-hand understanding. You would be an asset, not a charity case. His immediate acceptance of her terms should have been reassuring, but Zanele found herself searching for the catch, the hidden clause that would ultimately reveal this solution as too good to be true. "What's wrong?" Zane asked, noticing her continued hesitation. "I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted. "In my experience, solutions this clean don't exist." Something like compassion flickered in his eyes. "Your father's legacy of broken promises," he observed quietly. "Zanele, I can't undo that history or convince you of my trustworthiness through words alone. But I can offer transparency in all our dealings, both personal and professional." The simple acknowledgement of her fears and their legitimate origins touched her more deeply than grand declarations might have. "I want this to work," she confessed. "Both the practical arrangement and whatever is developing between us. As do I." His hand found hers again, fingers interlacing with deliberate intent. "More than I expected to want anything after the accident." The admission held weight, suggesting a significance to their connection that transcended conventional definitions. Not love, perhaps, it was too soon for such declarations, but something with the potential to become profound if given proper space to develop. "Then I accept your revised proposition," Zanele said, sealing the agreement with a kiss that quickly deepened beyond mere confirmation. Chapter 7. Blossoming Hearts. 2 weeks after their arrangement began, Zanele found herself settling into a new rhythm. The loan documents had been finalized, her father's creditors paid, and her position with the Micah Foundation officially established. During the day, she divided her time between overseeing addiction recovery initiatives and assisting with Zane's medical needs, though Eleanor had taken over the more clinical aspects of his care. Nights were spent in his arms, their relationship deepening with each conversation, each shared moment of vulnerability. "The board was impressed with your proposal for the community outreach program," Zane commented one evening as they sat on his private terrace, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. Even Vernon couldn't find fault with the projected outcomes. "He certainly tried," Zanele replied with a small smile. "The way he scrutinized every budget line, you'd think I was proposing to fund the program with his personal inheritance." "In his mind, that's exactly what you're doing." Zane sipped his wine thoughtfully. "Vernon has always viewed the company as his birthright. My parents' decision to leave controlling interest to me rather than splitting it equally between us has been a source of resentment since their deaths." These evening conversations had become Zanele's favorite part of their evolving relationship, moments when business discussions naturally flowed into personal revelations, gradually filling in the complex picture of Zane's life before she had entered it. "You never talk much about them," she observed. "Your parents." Something softened in his expression. "What would you like to know?" "Everything. How they met, what they were like, the parts of them you see in yourself." Zane set his wineglass down, his gaze turning toward the horizon where the last sliver of sun was disappearing. "They met at university, my father studying engineering, my mother pursuing education. He was brilliant, but socially awkward. She was outgoing, involved in every campus cause. Complete opposites in many ways, yet somehow perfectly matched." The affection in his voice revealed a depth of feeling he rarely displayed when discussing his past. "My father built the company from nothing, working from our garage initially, developing software solutions that larger corporations had overlooked. My mother kept teaching even after the company became successful. She believed in maintaining connection with ordinary lives, regardless of our financial situation. They sound remarkable, Zanele said softly. They were. His hand found hers across the small table between them. My father's determination, my mother's compassion. I've tried to incorporate both into how I lead the company, not always successfully. And Vernon. Where does he fit in the family picture? Zane's expression tightened slightly. My father's brother died when Vernon was 14. My parents took him in, raised him alongside me. We were brothers in all but blood, or so I believed until the accident. The bitterness that crept into his voice whenever he mentioned Vernon's betrayal remained raw, even years later. Zanele squeezed his hand gently, offering silent support. Enough about my family history, he said, visibly shifting away from painful memories. Tell me more about your foundation proposal. The Addiction Recovery Mentorship Program particularly impressed the board. Zanele allowed the change of subject, recognizing his need to retreat from vulnerability. It's based on what I wish had existed for my father. Peer support from people who truly understand the struggle, combined with practical assistance for the logistics of recovery. Transportation to meetings, childcare during therapy sessions, job placement services. Addressing the practical barriers to treatment. Zane nodded. It's precisely the kind of insight the Foundation's previous initiatives lacked. Experience is an effective teacher, she replied. Even painful experience has value when properly applied. Something in her words seemed to resonate with him. Indeed it does, he agreed softly, perhaps especially the painful kind. Later that night, as they lay together in the darkness of his bedroom, conversation turned to more intimate matters. Wrapped in each other's arms, they shared the kind of truths that only emerge in night's protective shadow. I was afraid I'd never feel this again, Zane admitted, his voice low against her hair. After the accident, the doctors were clinical but clear about the adjustments to intimate functioning, as they diplomatically phrased it. When Isabel left, I assumed that aspect of my life was over. And now, Zanele asked, her hand tracing patterns on his chest. Now I realize how limited my understanding was. His fingers skimmed along her bare shoulder. True intimacy has little to do with physical capability and everything to do with connection. The simple truth of his observation touched her deeply. Their physical relationship had indeed required adjustments and communication, discovering what was possible, what brought pleasure despite his partial paralysis. Yet those adaptations had fostered a deeper intimacy than Zanele had imagined possible, built on trust and vulnerability rather than conventional expectations. I never thought I'd trust anyone enough for this, she confessed. After years of my father's broken promises, I built walls I believed were impenetrable. Yet here we are, Zane observed, a smile evident in his voice. Here we are, she agreed, marveling at the unlikely journey that had brought them together. Days flowed into weeks, their relationship deepening as autumn gave way to winter. The mansion that had once intimidated Zanele with its opulence gradually became home, its spaces filled with shared memories and private jokes. Elena's initial disapproval had evolved into reluctant acceptance as she observed the positive effect Zanele had on Zane's well-being, not just physically, but emotionally. December brought preparations for the Micah Foundation's annual holiday gala, an event Zane had avoided since his accident, but now planned to attend with Zanele at his side. The decision to appear publicly as a couple represented a significant step, tacitly announcing their relationship to Seattle's business and social elite. Are you certain about this? Zanele asked as they reviewed the guest list together one evening. Vernon will be there, so will Isabel and her new husband. Precisely why we should attend, Zane replied with characteristic determination. I'm tired of ceding social territory to those who abandoned me. Besides, the foundation is your professional domain now. You should be present to discuss the initiatives you've developed. Despite his confidence, Zanele harbored concerns about their public debut. Her background was worlds away from the privileged circles that would attend the gala. The daughter of a disgraced alcoholic had no preparation for navigating the subtle social hierarchies of Seattle's elite. Her anxiety must have shown, for Zane took her hand, his expression softening. "You'll outshine everyone there," he assured her, "not because of your dress or jewelry, but because of your authenticity. These people have surrounded themselves with artifice for so long, they've forgotten what genuine strength looks like." The vote of confidence bolstered her resolve. "I won't embarrass you," she promised. "You couldn't if you tried," he replied with unexpected tenderness. "Zanele, you've faced foreclosure, FBI investigations, and your father's creditors without flinching. A ballroom full of overpriced suits and designer dresses should hardly register as a challenge." The night of the gala arrived with flurries of snow that dusted the mansion grounds in crystalline white. Zanele stood before the mirror in what had become their shared bedroom, hardly recognizing the woman reflected back at her. The gown Zane had insisted on purchasing, a deep burgundy creation that hugged her curves before flaring dramatically, transformed her usual practical appearance into something almost regal. "Stunning," Zane's voice came from the doorway, his eyes taking in every detail with evident appreciation. "Though I find myself preferring how you look in my t-shirts during our lazy Sunday mornings." The intimate observation brought warmth to her cheeks. "Careful," she warned playfully, "or we'll never make it to the gala." The evening that followed was a turning point in their relationship. Despite initial whispers and curious glances, Zanele found herself surprisingly comfortable in Zane's world. His quiet confidence, as he introduced her not as his caretaker or employee, but as his partner, made it clear to everyone present that she held a place of significance in his life. That night, as snow continued to fall outside their windows, they made love with a new depth of feeling, each touch, each whispered endearment carrying the weight of genuine emotion rather than mere physical desire. Something had shifted between them, some final barrier dissolved by their public declaration of connection. "I love you," Zane said afterward, the words emerging without preamble as they lay tangled together in the darkness. "I didn't plan to say that tonight. Perhaps not ever, but watching you tonight, seeing your strength and grace under pressure, I realized I'd be a fool to leave it unspoken." The declaration left Zanele momentarily speechless. Though their relationship had developed with surprising speed and intensity, neither had yet ventured into this territory of explicit emotional commitment. "You don't need to respond," he continued, misinterpreting her silence. "I understand if you're not—" "I love you too," she interrupted, the truth of the words resonating through her entire being. "I think I have since that first evening you asked about my father, when you told me his failings weren't my responsibility to carry." As they drifted towards sleep, snow continuing to blanket the world outside in pristine white, Zanele marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a desperate solution to immediate problems had blossomed into something neither could have anticipated. A love built not on fantasy or convenience, but on genuine understanding of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. Chapter 8. Hope on the Horizon. Despite their deepening relationship and professional successes, Zanele couldn't ignore Zane's growing frustration with his physical limitations. She noticed it in small moments, the tightening around his eyes during physical therapy, his lingering gaze when watching others perform simple movements he could no longer manage, the late nights he spent researching medical advancements on his tablet when he thought she was asleep. "Doctor, Harmon says your pain levels are increasing," she mentioned one evening as they reviewed his medication schedule. "The current treatment plan doesn't seem as effective anymore." Zane's expression remained carefully neutral. "It's manageable." "That's not what I asked," Zanele persisted gently. "We promised honesty, remember?" A slight smile touched his lips at the reminder of their agreement. "The pain has intensified," he admitted, "particularly in my lower back and left leg." "Why haven't you said anything?" "Because complaining changes nothing," he replied pragmatically. "The doctors have been clear about my condition's progressive nature. It's an expected development." The resignation in his voice troubled her deeply. This was the man who had built a business empire through relentless determination, who had refused to surrender leadership despite Vernon's schemes. Yet when it came to his physical condition, he had accepted limitations that seemed at odds with his fundamental character. That night, while Zane slept, Zanele slipped from their bed and made her way to his home office. His computer contained extensive medical files, detailed scans, surgical reports, and consultation notes from specialists across the country. With her authorized access credentials, she began reviewing documents she had previously only glimpsed. What emerged was a troubling pattern. Shortly after the accident, Zane had aggressively pursued every available treatment. Multiple surgeries had repaired critical damage, but his primary neurologist had ultimately delivered a sobering prognosis: permanent paralysis below mid-thigh level, with ongoing nerve pain as scar tissue developed around his spinal cord. At that point, something had changed in Zane's approach. Subsequent records showed him declining experimental treatments and refusing referrals to research programs. The timing, Zanele noted, coincided almost exactly with Isabel's departure. For the next 3 weeks, Zanele devoted every spare moment to researching spinal cord injuries. While Zane conducted business calls or worked with his physical therapist, she contacted medical researchers, scoured scientific journals, and joined online forums for medical professionals using her foundation credentials. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly through a medical conference announcement. Dr. Kenzie Melbourne, a pioneering neurosurgeon in Australia, had developed an innovative approach combining specialized surgery with stem cell therapy. The results with patients whose injuries resembled Zane's were unprecedented, significant mobility restoration in cases previously deemed permanent. "What are you working on so intently?" Zane asked one evening, wheeling into the foundation office where Zanele had been reviewing Dr. Melbourne's published studies. "You've been disappearing for hours lately." Caught off guard, Zanele hesitated only briefly before deciding on complete honesty. "Research on your condition," his eyebrow arched with surprise. "My condition has been thoroughly documented by specialists across 3 countries. There's nothing new to discover." "I disagree." She turned her tablet toward him, displaying Dr. Melbourne's results. "This surgeon in Australia is achieving remarkable outcomes with patients whose injuries mirror yours, even cases considered irreversible for years." Zane scanned the information, his expression carefully neutral. "Melbourne is 15,000 miles away, Zanele, and these are experimental procedures, not established treatments." "Experimental procedures with documented success rates," she countered. 70% of patients with complete paralysis similar to yours regained partial mobility. 30% achieved walking with minimal assistance. "After how many years?" he asked skeptically. "The longest cases shown here had injuries less than 18 months old. Mine is approaching 3 years. "Not all cases," Zanele replied, pulling up additional data. "This patient, paralyzed for 4 years before treatment, now walking with a single cane. She scrolled to another file. This woman, injured 5 years before intervention, now managing short distances with parallel bars. Zain studied the information, but she could see resistance in his posture. Zanele, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I've consulted with the best specialists in America. If significant recovery were possible, they would have recommended these approaches. American medicine hasn't adopted Dr. Melbourne's protocols yet, she explained. The combined surgical and stem cell technique is still considered experimental here, though it's been standard practice in his clinic for 3 years. She reached for his hand, her expression earnest. Zain, I've spent weeks researching this. I've spoken directly with Dr. Melbourne's team. They believe you're an excellent candidate for their program. Surprise flickered across his features. You contacted them without discussing it with me first? I sent anonymized versions of your medical records, she clarified. No identifying information. I wanted expert assessment before raising false hopes. The room fell silent as Zain processed this information. Finally, he asked the question she'd been expecting. Why, Zanele? Why invest so much effort into this? I've accepted my condition. Have you? She challenged gently. Or did you stop fighting for improvement when Isabel abandoned you? The timing in your medical records suggests the latter. The observation struck home. She could see it in the tightening of his jaw. That's not... It is, she insisted. You stopped pursuing aggressive treatment exactly when she walked out, as if her betrayal confirmed that fighting wasn't worth the effort. Pain flashed across his face before his professional mask returned. Perhaps there's some truth in your analysis, he acknowledged reluctantly. But Zanele, even if these treatments offer some possibility of improvement, the process would be long, painful, and without guarantees. Most worthwhile things are, she replied simply. She pulled up another document on her tablet. Detailed treatment protocols, rehabilitation requirements, and recovery timelines. I've already researched everything, she explained. The procedures would happen in Melbourne. 3 separate surgeries spaced 6 weeks apart, intensive rehabilitation between and afterward. The entire process would take 6 to 8 months. You've considered all this that thoroughly? Zain asked, genuine surprise evident in his voice. Yes. Her gaze held his steadily. Because I refuse to accept that this is all there is for you when evidence suggests otherwise. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability rarely displayed. And if it doesn't work? He asked quietly. If we go through all this only to discover nothing has changed? Then we'll know we tried everything possible, she answered, and we'll continue our life together exactly as we have been. But Zain, her voice grew more intense, what if it does work? What if this is your chance to reclaim some of what was taken from you? For long moments, he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he reached out to touch her face with a gentleness that made her heart ache. You truly believe this is possible, don't you? He asked softly. I believe it's worth trying, she corrected. The science is sound. The surgeon is renowned. The success cases are documented. The only question is whether you're willing to hope again. The word hung between them, weighted with significance. Hope, the very thing Zain had abandoned along with his pursuit of recovery. After 2 days of intensive research and consideration, Zain called a meeting with his medical team to review Dr. Melbourne's approach. By week's end, he had scheduled video consultations with former patients and arranged for secure transfer of his complete medical records to Australia. I've made my decision, he announced one evening, as they watched the sunset from their terrace. We leave for Melbourne in 3 weeks. Dr. Melbourne has agreed to take my case. Joy surged through Zanele, though she kept her expression measured. You won't regret this, she promised. I might, he countered realistically. The success rates, while promising, are far from guaranteed. But you were right about one thing. I stopped fighting because it seemed easier than hoping. That's not who I am. That's not who we are. The emphasis on we wasn't lost on Zanele. This journey would be theirs together, a shared battle against limitations that had once seemed permanent. I've instructed the legal team to prepare for my extended absence, Zane continued, his business mind already organizing logistics. Vernon will require careful monitoring. The board has been informed I'm pursuing specialized treatment overseas, though I've kept details minimal. Elena and I will coordinate security and communication protocols, Zanele added, slipping naturally into planning mode. The Foundation programs can be managed remotely, with quarterly visits from either of us if necessary. Zane reached for her hand, his expression softening from strategic calculation to something more vulnerable. I need you to understand something important, Zanele. I'm doing this because your research and advocacy have convinced me it's scientifically worth pursuing. But I'm not expecting miracles. I know, she assured him. If this fails, nothing changes between us, she interrupted firmly. My love isn't conditional on your physical capabilities, Zane. I'm pursuing this because I believe you deserve every possible chance at recovery, not because I need or expect it. The simple declaration seemed to touch something deep within him. He drew her closer, their foreheads nearly touching. How did I get so fortunate, he murmured, to find someone who fights for me when I had stopped fighting for myself? The weeks before departure passed in a flurry of preparations. Specialized medical equipment was shipped ahead. Secure communication systems were established. Business operations were restructured for remote management. Through it all, Zanele noticed subtle changes in Zane's demeanor. The resignation that had shadowed his approach to physical therapy transformed into renewed determination. For the first time since she had known him, he was allowing himself to envision a future beyond the limitations he had accepted as permanent. Hope had returned to his horizon, cautious and carefully managed, but present nonetheless. Whether Dr. Melbourne's treatments would fulfill that hope remained to be seen. But as Zanele watched Zane approach this new chapter with characteristic courage and analytical precision, she knew that taking this journey together had already healed something significant in both of them, regardless of the physical outcome that awaited across the ocean. Chapter 9. The Australian Miracle. Dr. Melbourne is ready to see you now, the nurse announced, her Australian accent lilting pleasantly. Zanele squeezed Zane's hand as they were ushered into a modern office overlooking Melbourne's glittering skyline. 3 weeks had passed since Zane had agreed to pursue treatment. They'd arrived in Australia yesterday after a 14-hour flight on his private jet. Despite the luxury accommodations, Zanele had noticed the toll travel had taken on him, new tension lines around his mouth, the careful way he managed his pain without complaint. Dr. Kenzie Melbourne rose from behind his desk, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and confident eyes that had performed groundbreaking surgeries on hundreds of patients. Mr. Micah, Miss Dion, welcome to Melbourne. His handshake was firm, his expression professionally optimistic without promising miracles. Your case is particularly interesting, Dr. Melbourne began after they'd settled. Detailed scans of Zane's spine displayed on wall-mounted screens. The initial surgical interventions after your accident were well executed, but they followed traditional protocols focused on stabilization rather than regeneration. Zane nodded. Recovery beyond basic upper body function wasn't considered realistic. That perspective is becoming outdated, Dr. Melbourne replied, highlighting specific areas of the scan. Our approach combines 3 elements: surgical decompression of the damaged cord segments, injection of specially cultivated stem cells, and an intensive neurostimulation protocol during rehabilitation. For the next hour, he detailed the treatment plan. 3 separate surgeries spaced 6 weeks apart, with specialized therapy between each procedure. The statistical outcomes were presented candidly. 70% chance of significant improvement, 20% chance of minimal change, 10% risk of complications requiring additional intervention. "I won't sugarcoat this, Mr. Micah," Dr. Melbourne concluded. "The process is demanding, painful, and requires absolute commitment. But for patients with your specific injury profile, the potential benefits justify the challenges." "And the best case outcome?" Zain asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Based on your scans and medical history, successful treatment could potentially restore function to your lower limbs, sufficient for walking with minimal assistance," the doctor answered. "Upper leg strength would likely return more completely than lower. Some patients achieve independence with a single cane." Zanele watched emotions flicker across Zain's carefully controlled expression. Hope battling skepticism, determination warring with the fear of disappointment. "When can we begin?" Zain finally asked. "We've already prepared for your arrival, Doctor," Melbourne replied with a small smile. "The first procedure is scheduled for tomorrow morning, assuming your pre-surgical assessments confirm candidacy." The following day passed in a blur of medical evaluations, consent forms, and final preparations. As evening approached, Zanele sat beside Zain's hospital bed, their hands intertwined. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "Not of the surgery," he admitted, "of hoping too much." Zanele understood completely. For Zain, hope had become more frightening than resignation. Each time he had allowed himself to believe in possibility after the accident, disappointment had followed, medical setbacks, Isabel's abandonment, Vernon's betrayal. "Whatever happens," she promised, "I'm here. Not as your caretaker, but as your partner. That doesn't change, regardless of the outcome." Before dawn the next morning, they wheeled Zain toward the operating theatre. Dr. Melbourne met them at the threshold, already gowned for surgery. "We'll take good care of him," he assured Zanele. "The procedure should last approximately 5 hours. Those hours stretched endlessly as Zanele waited, alternating between pacing the private waiting room and answering urgent foundation emails to distract herself. When Dr. Melbourne finally appeared, his surgical mask lowered, his expression was cautiously positive. "The decompression was successful," he reported. "Scar tissue removal more extensive than anticipated, but the cord itself showed excellent viability. We've inserted the first stem cell matrix precisely at the primary damage sites." "And now?" Zanele asked. "Now we wait," he replied. "Recovery from this first procedure takes 3 to 4 weeks. We'll begin specialized stimulation therapy once initial healing is complete." The days that followed established a grueling pattern. Zain, never one to show weakness, faced the excruciating post-surgical pain with stoic determination. The specialized therapy, combining electrical stimulation with targeted movement attempts, proved even more challenging than the surgery itself. Again, the rehabilitation specialist instructed as Zain lay on the therapy table, sweat beading on his forehead, as he concentrated on moving muscles that had been dormant for years. "I don't feel anything," he admitted through gritted teeth. "You won't yet," the therapist explained patiently. "We're establishing neural pathways that the stem cells will eventually connect with. The effort matters even without immediate sensation." 2 weeks after the first surgery, during a particularly intense therapy session, Zanele noticed Zain's left leg twitch slightly when the stimulation was applied. The movement was barely perceptible, could have been dismissed as involuntary spasm, but the therapist's expression confirmed its significance. "That's intentional movement," she noted, making careful records. "The pattern corresponds precisely with the attempted action." Hope flickered in Zane's eyes before his analytical caution reasserted itself. One muscle twitch doesn't indicate functional recovery, he reminded them both. No, the therapist agreed, but it's precisely on schedule with Dr. Melbourne's projected timeline. It's an excellent sign. 6 weeks later, the second surgery proceeded as planned. This operation focused on secondary damage sites, introducing additional stem cell matrices and removing remaining scar tissue that impeded potential regeneration. The recovery proved even more demanding than the first, the pain more intense as dormant nerves began showing signs of reactivation. Pain is actually positive in this context, Doctor, Melbourne explained during rounds. It indicates nerve function returning to previously non-responsive areas. Zanele maintained constant presence throughout the ordeal, managing foundation business remotely while supporting Zane through increasingly difficult therapy sessions. She watched with carefully measured optimism as small improvements accumulated. First twitches, becoming deliberate movements, sensation gradually returning to previously numb areas. It's actually working, Zane admitted one evening, 3 weeks after the second surgery. They sat on the balcony of their rented apartment overlooking Melbourne's botanical gardens, the southern hemisphere's spring, bringing new blossoms that seemed appropriately symbolic. You sound surprised, Zanele teased gently. I am, he acknowledged. I'd convinced myself that acceptance was wiser than hope. Expectations lead to disappointment. And now, his hand found hers, now I'm allowing myself to consider possibilities I'd abandoned. It's terrifying. Progress usually is, she replied softly. The third and final surgery occurred exactly on schedule, 4 months after their arrival in Australia. This procedure was the most targeted, focusing on establishing connections between the regenerating nerve pathways and specific muscle groups in Zane's legs. Recovery from this operation proved transformative. 2 weeks afterward, during a therapy session with the parallel bars, Zane managed to bear partial weight on his legs for the first time since the accident. The movement was shaky, required significant upper body strength to compensate, but represented undeniable progress. That's it, the therapist encouraged as Zane struggled to maintain position. Your quadriceps are engaging independently now. Feel the difference. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he nodded, concentration etched in every line of his face. Left side stronger than right, he observed clinically, even in this emotional moment maintaining his analytical nature. Progress accelerated after this breakthrough. Daily therapy sessions grew longer, more demanding, but produced increasingly significant results. 6 weeks later, Zane took his first assisted steps, still heavily dependent on the parallel bars, still requiring intense concentration for each movement, but undeniably walking. Zanele recorded this milestone on her phone, tears streaming unchecked down her face as she documented the moment Zane had believed would never come. Enough documentation, he said with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. Come here. She moved to stand before him within the parallel bars. With painstaking effort, he took 3 shuffling steps forward until they stood face to face. Hi, she whispered, overwhelmed by the simple fact of meeting him at eye level for the first time in their relationship. Hi yourself, he replied, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I've been wanting to do this for months. With careful balance, he released one hand from the support bar and pulled her close for a kiss that tasted of triumph and possibility. Over the next 2 months, Zane's mobility improved steadily. The wheelchair was gradually replaced by a specialized walker, then by forearm crutches, and finally, for shorter distances, a single carbon fiber cane. His gait remained somewhat uneven, the legacy of nerve damage that even Dr. Melbourne's groundbreaking techniques couldn't completely reverse. But the transformation was nothing short of miraculous to everyone who had witnessed his journey. "You've achieved outcomes beyond our initial projections," Dr. Melbourne noted during their final consultation, 7 months after their arrival in Australia. "The neural regeneration is continuing at an impressive rate. With consistent therapy following the protocols we've established, you should see continued improvement for another 6 to 12 months. "And long-term prognosis?" Zane asked, seated now in a regular chair rather than a wheelchair, a change that still sometimes startled Zanele when she entered a room to find him. "Barring unforeseen complications, you'll maintain the mobility you've achieved and likely improve further," the doctor replied. "You'll always have some limitations. Distance walking will likely require assistance, and you'll need to manage ongoing nerve sensitivity. But functionally, you've reclaimed approximately 70% of pre-injury capability. That's exceptional for your injury profile." As they prepared to return to Seattle, Zanele found herself reflecting on their Australian journey. The physical transformation was obvious and dramatic. Zane would return standing on his own legs, capable of movement that had once seemed impossible. Yet the emotional transformation seemed equally significant. The man who had accepted limitations with bitter resignation had rediscovered his fundamental nature, determined, strategic, unwilling to accept defeat when solutions might exist. "Ready to go home?" Zane asked as they packed their belongings the night before departure. "More than ready," Zanele admitted, "though part of me will miss this place. It's where miracles happened." Zane crossed the room to where she stood, folding clothes, walking slowly but without assistance, a sight that still filled her with wonder. His arms encircled her. From behind, his chin resting on her shoulder in a gesture that would have been impossible before their Australian journey. "The miracle wasn't Melbourne," he said softly. "It was you believing recovery was possible when I'd stopped believing." She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw, a gesture she'd made countless times, but now standing rather than kneeling or sitting. "We did this together," she corrected. "Your determination, my research, Dr. Melbourne's skill. Team effort." "Team Micah," he agreed with a smile, the playfulness in his tone reflecting another change their journey had wrought. The serious, controlled CEO had discovered moments of lightness, of simple joy in movement and possibility. That night, as Zanele drifted toward sleep in their temporary Australian home, she allowed herself to imagine their return to Seattle. Zane walking into board meetings that had previously accommodated his wheelchair, the look on Vernon's face when his cousin entered standing rather than seated, the foundation gala where they would dance together for the first time. Yet beneath these happy anticipations, a small shadow of doubt crept in, not about Zane's recovery, which continued to exceed expectations, but about her own place in this transformed reality. The world that had rejected Zane in his paralysis would embrace him again in his recovery. What role would remain for the woman who had entered his life during his most vulnerable period? Would the connection forged in adversity sustain them in triumph? These questions circled in her mind as sleep finally claimed her, unaware that they foreshadowed challenges neither had anticipated when they first arrived on Australian shores, seeking what had seemed impossible. Chapter 10. The Empty Pillow. The return to Seattle brought unexpected challenges. News of Zane Micah's miraculous recovery had preceded their arrival, courtesy of Vernon's business contacts in Australia. Their private jet had barely touched down before media requests began flooding Elena's inbox. "They're calling it a medical miracle," Elena reported as they drove from the airport to the mansion. "Business journals are particularly interested in how this will affect company leadership." "Vernon's doing," Zane stated, his expression hardening. "He's forcing a public narrative before we've had time to establish our own." Zanelli watched his reaction with quiet concern. Throughout their Australian journey, they had existed in a protected bubble, focused entirely on recovery, sheltered from outside complications. Now, reality rushed back with uncomfortable speed. Within days, Zane insisted on visiting Mica Industries headquarters. Against Dr. Melbourne's recommendation for a gradual reintroduction to professional stresses, he scheduled a full board meeting, determined to demonstrate his improved condition and reassert his leadership. "Let me at least come with you," Zanelli urged as he prepared for the meeting, moving with careful precision as he navigated their bedroom with a sleek carbon fiber cane. "No," he replied, softening his refusal with a gentle touch to her cheek. "This first appearance needs to be strictly business. Vernon will be looking for any angle to undermine me, including suggesting that I require assistance." Zanel recognized the logic of his position, but something about his insistence troubled her. The Zane who had left for Australia had valued her partnership in all areas of his life. This Zane seemed suddenly concerned with appearances, with proving independent capability. The board meeting proved even more consequential than anticipated. Zane returned home exhilarated, moving through the mansion with newfound energy despite the physical exertion. "You should have seen Vernon's face when I walked into that room," he told her, satisfaction evident in his voice. The entire board stood, actual standing ovation. The stock price jumped 8 points by closing. "That's wonderful," Zanelli replied, genuinely happy for his triumph while noticing the subtle shift in his priorities. Before Australia, business success had been secondary to their relationship. Now it seemed to be reclaiming its former prominence in his attention. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity as Zane vigorously reclaimed territories of his life that paralysis had previously restricted. He resumed in-person client meetings, oversaw the launch of a new technology division, and accepted speaking engagements that had been declined for years. His mobility continued improving with daily therapy, his dependence on the cane decreasing steadily. Through it all, Zanelli found herself increasingly sidelined. Not intentionally, Zane remained affectionate, appreciative of her role in his recovery, but circumstantially, as his expanding activities left less time for their previously close partnership. The shift became more apparent at social functions. At the first charity gala they attended after returning, Zanelli noticed how attention naturally gravitated towards Zane's remarkable recovery story. People who had previously acknowledged her as his essential companion now seemed to view her presence as incidental. "Zanelli made this possible," Zane would insist, when accepting congratulations, pulling her closer with genuine pride. "She found Dr. Melbourne when every specialist here had written off further improvement, yet despite his acknowledgements, whispers began. Zanelli overheard fragments at the Foundation's spring fundraiser, hushed comments about fortunate timing and securing her position before his recovery. One particularly cutting remark from a board member's wife carried clearly, "She got in while he was vulnerable." Clever girl. The comment burned like acid, all the more painful because it echoed her own deepening insecurity. As Zane continued reclaiming his independence, her role in his life seemed increasingly undefined. The foundation of their relationship, built during his dependence on her care, had fundamentally shifted. That night, as they prepared for bed, Zanelli found herself studying Zane with new awareness. The physical changes were remarkable. Increased muscle definition from rigorous therapy, improved color from outdoor activities, the confident posture of a man who commanded respect rather than sympathy. But deeper changes troubled her more, subtle shifts in perspective as he reclaimed the privileged position he had occupied before his accident. "Vernon approached me about a Tokyo expansion," he mentioned as they settled beneath the covers. "It would require extensive travel initially, but could double our market position in Asia." "You're considering it?" Zanele asked, surprised by the international ambition so soon after their return. Why wouldn't I? He countered. It's precisely the kind of opportunity I would have pursued before the accident. The simple statement revealed volumes about his mindset. Before the accident had become his new reference point, not before Australia, not before us. Sleep eluded Zanele that night, as Zane rested peacefully beside her. Their journey had been extraordinary by any measure, from employer and desperate job seeker to partners who had conquered seemingly insurmountable odds together. Yet now, with those odds defeated, something fundamental had changed. Not Zane's feelings for her, she didn't doubt his love, but his identity was realigning with his restored capability, while hers remained defined largely by her relationship to him. In Seattle society, she was still the former caretaker who had somehow captured a billionaire's affection during his most vulnerable period. How long before those whispers reached him? How long before someone explicitly suggested she had manipulated his vulnerability for personal gain? Worst of all, how long before some tiny part of him might begin to wonder if there was truth in such accusations? Morning found her standing at their bedroom window, watching sunrise paint the coastal landscape in shades of promise. Zane approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist with a physical confidence that still seemed miraculous. "You didn't sleep," he observed, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "Foundation worries." "Just thinking," she replied, leaning back against him. "About?" She hesitated, uncertain how to articulate concerns that felt simultaneously valid and ungrateful. "About us, how everything has changed." "For the better," he said simply, turning her to face him. "Because of you, Zanele, I wouldn't be standing here without your stubbornness and faith." "I know," she acknowledged, "but sometimes I wonder if that's the problem." His brow furrowed with confusion. "What do you mean?" "People are talking," she admitted reluctantly, "about my motives, suggesting I targeted you when you were vulnerable, secured my position before your recovery." Anger flashed across his features. "Who's saying this? Vernon?" "It doesn't matter who," she replied. "The narrative makes a certain sense from outside. The timing, the circumstances, they create a particular appearance." "Since when do you care about appearances?" he challenged. "That's never been who you are, Zanele." "I care about your reputation," she countered. "You're standing with the board, with clients. You've worked too hard regaining everything to have it undermined by whispers about your judgment regarding me." Zane's expression softened as he recognized her genuine concern. "No one whose opinion matters questions my judgment about you," he assured her. "Those who know us understand what we've built together." His confidence should have been reassuring, yet as the day progressed, Zanele found herself revisiting their conversation with growing certainty that he had missed her deeper concern. The issue wasn't simply outside perception, but the changing nature of their relationship itself, the shift from essential partnership to something increasingly imbalanced as he reclaimed his place in a world where she had no independent standing. That evening, Zane announced he would be attending an emergency board session. Vernon's managed to create unnecessary drama about the Tokyo expansion, he explained, checking his watch with the familiar gesture of a busy executive. "Don't wait up. These things tend to run late." After he left, Zanele moved through their shared space with growing clarity. Each room held memories of their journey together, from her first days as his reluctant caretaker through their evolution into lovers and partners. Each space also reflected the fundamental imbalance in their positions, his wealth and status evident in every expensive detail, her presence little more than a temporary addition to his established life. The decision crystallized gradually as evening deepened into night. By midnight, certainty had replaced doubt. By 2 in the morning, She had packed a single suitcase with essential belongings. By 3, she had composed and rewritten the letter a dozen times, searching for words that would explain her departure without causing unnecessary pain. The final version lay in an envelope on her pillow as dawn approached. Zane, I was here to heal you, to serve you. Now that you are fine, I must leave. If I stay, people will call me a gold digger. You deserve someone better than me. What we shared was real, perhaps the most real connection I've ever known. But it began in a reality that no longer exists. You are once again the man who commanded boardrooms and shaped industries. I am still the daughter of a disgraced alcoholic with no place in your world except through your continued choice to include me. You deserve the freedom to embrace your restored life without the complications my presence creates. Know that I leave carrying nothing but what I brought and memories I will always treasure. With love and gratitude, Zanele. She placed the letter carefully on her pillow, then bent to press a final kiss to Zane's forehead as he slept. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake, exhausted from the late board meeting and unaware that everything was about to change again. The mansion's security system recognized her authorized departure, doors opening silently as she carried her single suitcase to the waiting taxi. As the vehicle pulled away from the gates, Zanele allowed herself one backward glance at the place that had briefly been home. Then she faced forward, toward an uncertain future she would navigate alone, just as she had before a desperate job application had led her to Zane Micah's door. Morning sunlight streamed through the bedroom windows as Zane reached across the bed, finding only empty space where Zanele should have been. His hand encountered paper instead of warmth, the carefully folded letter waiting on her pillow. As realization dawned in his eyes, the envelope fell from suddenly trembling fingers. For the first time since standing on his own legs in Australia, Zane Micah found himself truly unsteady, facing a loss more profound than any physical capability could compensate for. Chapter 11. The Public Declaration. It's been 3 weeks, sir. Elena's voice held rare gentleness as she placed another stack of contracts on Zane's desk. The private investigators have found no trace of her. Zane barely glanced up from his computer screen, where dozens of search windows displayed various tracking attempts. Despite employing the best resources money could buy, Zanele had disappeared as completely as if she'd never existed. Her phone remained unanswered. The small apartment she'd rented under a different name had been vacated before investigators arrived. Even Maya, her only known friend, claimed ignorance of her whereabouts. She doesn't want to be found, Elena added unnecessarily. Zane's jaw tightened. That much is obvious. He gestured to the letter he still kept on his desk, its creases deepening from constant handling. What isn't obvious is why she believed this necessary. The pain of Zanele's departure had transformed from shock to determination. Zane approached the problem like any business challenge, systematically, relentlessly, with all resources at his disposal. Yet for the first time in his professional life, his legendary problem-solving abilities had failed him completely. The Foundation board meeting requires your attention this afternoon, Elena reminded him, tactfully changing the subject. They're voting on continuing Ms. Dion's addiction recovery initiatives without her leadership. The programs continue, Zane stated flatly. Non-negotiable. Elena nodded, recognizing the tone that brooked no argument. As she turned to leave, Zane's gaze fell on the television playing silently in the corner of his office. Standard business news that normally provided background. Awareness of market conditions. Wait, he commanded suddenly. Turn that up. The screen showed promotional material for American Connection, the country's highest-rated reality show where participants shared personal stories seeking reunions with estranged loved ones. The program's upcoming season premiere was being hyped with unprecedented audience expectations. "That's it," Zane whispered, an idea forming with sudden clarity. "Sir?" Elena looked confused. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week," he instructed, already reaching for his phone, "and get me whatever producer runs that show." "American Connection?" Elena's perpetual composure faltered. "You can't possibly be considering—" "I'm not considering," Zane interrupted, his expression set with familiar determination. "I'm doing it. If Zanele won't allow me to find her privately, I'll have to change the parameters." Within 48 hours, the entertainment world buzzed with unprecedented news. Zane Micah, notoriously private CEO of Micah Industries, would appear on the season premiere of American Connection, seeking to reconnect with an unnamed individual. The show's producers, stunned by his approach and the substantial donation he made to their associated charity, fast-tracked production to accommodate his timeline. Vernon was the first to object, arriving unannounced at the mansion the morning after the announcement. "Have you completely lost your mind?" he demanded, barging into Zane's office. "The board is in uproar. Our institutional investors are questioning your judgment. All this over a girl who walked out on you." Zane continued reviewing documents, not bothering to look up. "Your concern is noted." "This goes beyond concern, Zane. This is professional suicide." Vernon paced the office, genuinely agitated. "You've spent years rebuilding your reputation after the accident. The Tokyo expansion is finally gaining traction, and now you'll throw it all away by humiliating yourself on national television." Zane finally raised his eyes, his gaze cold. "I'm not discussing this with you, Vernon. The decision is made." "Then unmake it." Vernon slammed his hands on the desk. "For God's sake, she was your caretaker. A nobody from nowhere who attached herself to you when you were vulnerable and left the moment you didn't need her services." The characterization, so contrary to the truth of their relationship, hit a raw nerve. Zane rose slowly, his physical presence now imposing in ways that had been impossible during his disability. "Get out," he said quietly, the softness of his tone more threatening than any shout. "And understand this, Vernon. If you ever speak of Zanele that way again, your position at Micah Industries will become as non-existent as your integrity." After Vernon's hasty departure, Zane turned to the window, staring out at the ocean view that had once provided peaceful reflection. The past 3 weeks had forced painful reassessment of priorities he had taken for granted since his recovery. Business success, physical independence, professional respect, all had returned with seemingly miraculous speed. Yet without Zanele to share them, these achievements felt hollow. Her letter's words haunted him constantly. "The world you've returned to has no natural place for me." Only now did he recognize how his enthusiastic re-entry into that world had unintentionally reinforced her outsider status. While celebrating his recovery, he had failed to notice her growing isolation. The night of American Connection's live broadcast arrived with media attention exceeding even the producer's ambitious expectations. Zane waited backstage, ignoring the nervous energy of production assistants and the host's repeated attempts at pre-show small talk. His focus remained singular, reaching Zanele, wherever she might be watching. "We've never had viewership projections like this," the show's executive producer informed him, clearly delighted by the ratings bonanza. 10 million minimum, potentially twice that with streaming and social media. Zane nodded absently. The audience size meant nothing except increasing the chances that Zanele, or someone who knew her current location, would be watching. 2 minutes, Mr. Micah," a production assistant called. Taking a deep breath, Zane straightened his tie and mentally reviewed what he would say. No script had been prepared. The producers had agreed his message would be entirely his own, without their usual emotional manipulation or commercial interruptions. The host's voice boomed through the speakers. Tonight, a special edition of American Connection brings you the unprecedented appearance of one of America's most successful business leaders. CEO Zane Micah, whose remarkable medical recovery made headlines worldwide, joins us with a personal message for someone who changed his life forever. The audience applauded as Zane walked onto the set, his movements fluid and confident. The cane he occasionally still used deliberately left backstage. He took his seat across from the host, whose practiced sympathetic expression couldn't hide his excitement at this ratings coup. Mr. Micah, thank you for joining us for what I understand is your first ever television appearance, the host began. My first and hopefully last, Zane replied with the hint of a smile, his calm demeanor betraying nothing of his inattention. You've requested to speak directly to our audience without our usual format, the host continued. The floor is yours. As the camera zoomed in, Zane looked directly into the lens, imagining Zanele on the other side. 3 months ago, I stood on my own legs for the first time in nearly 3 years, he began, his voice steady. It was a moment doctors had said would never come. A medical miracle made possible not by surgical skill alone, but by one person's refusal to accept limitations that everyone else, including me, had declared permanent. The studio audience remained silent, captivated by the intensity of his gaze. Her name is Zanele Deon, Zane continued. She came into my life when I was at my lowest point. Physically dependent, emotionally isolated, having been abandoned by everyone I thought cared for me. She began as my caretaker, but became something far more profound. My conscience, my courage, my reason to believe in possibility again. He paused, swallowing against unexpected emotion. 3 weeks ago, Zanele left without warning. Her letter explained she was leaving to protect me. From gossip, from having to defend our relationship, from the complications her presence created in the world I had rejoined. What she failed to understand is that without her, that world holds no meaning for me. The camera pulled back slightly as Zane leaned forward, his expression more vulnerable than anyone in his professional life had ever witnessed. Zanele believed she had no place in my world. The truth is, she created my world, not just by finding the treatment that restored my mobility, but by showing me what genuine partnership means. Before her, I measured success by market share and stock prices. She taught me to measure it by integrity, courage, and the capacity to love without conditions or limitations. He took a breath, then continued with growing intensity. I'm not here seeking pity or public sympathy. I'm here with a message for one person. Zanele, you walked away to protect me from having to choose between you and the life I'd reclaimed. What you didn't understand is that there is no choice. There is no life worth reclaiming if you're not in it. The studio had grown so silent that his voice seemed to fill every corner. The whispers you feared, the judgments you thought would damage me, they're meaningless. The only opinion that matters is mine. And I have never been more certain of anything than I am of this. You belong with me, not because of what you did for me, but because of who we become together. Without breaking eye contact with the camera, Zane slowly stood and then, in a gesture that sent audible gasps through the studio audience, lowered himself to one knee. Zanele Deon, wherever you are watching this, I have one question. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning emerald ring. Will you come home and be my wife? Not my caretaker, not my companion, but my equal partner in everything that matters. For several heartbeats, absolute silence filled the studio. Then, from somewhere in the audience, a commotion broke the stillness. The camera swung to capture movement in the third row as someone stood, creating a ripple of whispers that spread outward. Zanele stood frozen in place, her eyes wide with disbelief. The producers, recognizing the unexpected dramatic potential, immediately directed cameras to focus on her shocked expression. "Zanele?" Zane's voice cracked slightly as he rose to his feet, squinting against the stage lights to confirm the impossible, that she was actually there, in the studio audience. She nodded almost imperceptibly, tears streaming unchecked down her face. Then, as if some spell had broken, she moved toward the stage, while the audience erupted in applause, and the host stood dumbfounded by this unscripted development. They met at the edge of the stage, ignoring cameras, lights, and the millions watching. Zane reached for her hands, his eyes searching her face as if memorizing features he had feared never seeing again. "How did you—" he began. "Maya," Zanele explained, her voice barely audible over the audience's continued applause. "She got tickets when she heard you would appear. I didn't know— I never thought that I would make such a public spectacle." Zane finished with a small smile. "Neither did I. But you left me no choice." "I was trying to protect you," she whispered. "I don't need protection," he replied, gently wiping tears from her cheek. "I need you." The host, recovering his professional composure, approached cautiously. "Ms. Dion, would you like to respond to Mr. Micah's question? We have quite an audience waiting." Zanele barely glanced at him, her eyes never leaving Zane's face. "Yes," she said simply, "to everything." As Zane slipped the emerald ring onto her finger, the studio audience rose in a standing ovation. Cameras captured the moment from every angle, broadcasting to millions the culmination of a love story that had begun in desperate circumstances and now stood validated before the world. Chapter 12. Vows Beyond Measure. The engagement announcement dominated media coverage for weeks. What began as business news, CEO Zane Micah's unexpected television appearance, quickly transformed into a modern fairy tale that captivated the public imagination. Their story had all the elements of compelling drama: the wealthy CEO paralyzed while saving a child, the dedicated caretaker who refused to accept his condition as permanent, the journey to Australia for experimental treatment, culminating in the romantic public proposal that reunited them after her selfless departure. Zanele found the attention overwhelming. "I never expected this level of interest," she confessed as they reviewed yet another interview request. "How do you handle being so visible?" "By remembering it's temporary," Zane assured her. "Public attention always shifts eventually. Until then, we control the narrative." That approach guided their wedding preparations. Against expectations of an extravagant society event, they chose intimacy over spectacle. The ceremony would take place at the mansion, with only 50 carefully selected guests and strict privacy measures. "Vernon thinks we're making a mistake," Zane mentioned one evening as they finalized arrangements. "He believes a high-profile wedding would benefit the company." "And what do you think?" Zanele asked, studying his expression. "I think Vernon still doesn't understand what matters to me." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the emerald ring that now felt natural on her finger. "This day is about us, not Micah Industries' public image." The months between engagement and wedding brought healing conversations that should have happened before Zanele's departure. Late-night discussions clarified misunderstandings, addressed insecurities, and established new foundations for their relationship, one built on mutual need rather than caretaker and patient. "I never saw you primarily as someone who needed care," Zanele explained during one such conversation. "But I feared others would always see me that way, the nurse who capitalized on her patient's vulnerability. While I was busy proving my independence, I missed how my actions reinforced those perceptions," Zane acknowledged. "I wanted to show the world I was fully recovered without realizing that meant showing you too." These honest exchanges created deeper understanding between them. Zanele's position with the foundation was formalized with expanded authority, giving her professional standing independent of her relationship with Zayn. Meanwhile, he deliberately included her in business functions, making clear to associates that she was his partner in all aspects of life, not merely his former caretaker. On their wedding morning, Zanele stood before the mirror in the guest suite she had insisted on using the night before. Traditional separation before the ceremony, she had explained, though both knew the real reason was to mark the transition. She would enter their shared bedroom that night, not as his caretaker or girlfriend, but as his wife. The gown she had chosen embodied her practical nature while honoring the occasion's significance. Elegant ivory silk, with simple lines, no elaborate train or excessive embellishments. Her hair was styled in sophisticated braids, adorned with tiny pearl pins, a delicate veil attached at the crown. A knock at the door revealed Eleanor, whose initial disapproval had evolved into grudging respect over the past year. "The guests are seated," she announced. "Mr. Micah is waiting at the altar." "Is he nervous?" Zanele asked, adjusting her veil one final time. "Not visibly," Elena replied with the hint of a smile, "though he's checked his watch approximately 12 times in the past 10 minutes. The ceremony space transformed the mansion's grand terrace overlooking the ocean. White chairs faced an elegant floral arch, beneath which waited Zayn, standing tall without assistance, his recovery now so complete that new acquaintances would never guess he had once been paralyzed. As traditional music began, guests rose to witness Zanele's entrance. She had chosen to walk alone, no father to give her away, no replacement figure needed. This journey, like so many in her life, she would make independently, meeting Zayn as his equal. Their eyes locked as she approached, his expression softening with emotion rarely displayed in public. When she reached him, he took her hands, whispering words meant only for her. "You are more beautiful than the day you walked into my office and changed everything." The officiant began the ceremony with customary remarks about love and commitment, but the traditional script had been modified at the couple's request. When the time came for vows, Zayn spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "Zanele, I come to this moment standing on my own feet because you refused to accept limitations others declared permanent. That miracle, extraordinary as it is, pales compared to the greater gift you've given me, showing me that true strength isn't found in physical capability or business success, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to love without reservation, to rebuild what seems irreparably broken." He squeezed her hands gently before continuing. "I vow to remember the lessons you've taught me, that wealth means nothing without purpose, that independence isn't the same as isolation, that healing happens in unexpected ways through unexpected people. I vow to be your partner in all things, to value your wisdom above my own certainty, to create a life where you never again question your essential place in my world." Tears glistened in Zanele's eyes as she began her response, her voice soft but carrying clearly across the hushed gathering. "Zayn, I came into your life seeking survival, but found something I never expected. A man whose determination matched my own, whose wounds complemented rather than repelled mine, whose strength wasn't diminished by vulnerability, but magnified by it." She took a steadying breath before continuing. "I vow to remember that our beginning, unusual as it was, gave us foundations most couples never develop, seeing each other at our most vulnerable, communicating through impossible challenges, finding connection that transcends physical circumstance. I vow to be your equal partner, never defined by what I do for you, but by who we become together." The exchange of rings followed, a simple platinum band joining the emerald engagement ring on her finger, a matching band for his. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss held both tenderness and promise, sealing vows that acknowledged their uncommon journey. The intimate reception flowed seamlessly from ceremony to celebration. Even Vernon maintained cordial behavior, though his congratulations carried the stiff formality of someone fulfilling obligation rather than expressing genuine pleasure. "He'll come around eventually," Zane observed as they shared their first dance. "Or he won't. Either way, his opinion matters far less than it once did." As evening descended, guests gradually departed until only the newlyweds remained on the terrace, watching moonlight create a silver path across the ocean. The same view that had witnessed their earliest conversations now framed the beginning of their marriage. "Second thoughts?" Zane asked, noting her contemplative expression. "No," Zanelli replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Just appreciating how far we've come, from employer and desperate job applicant to this. It's quite a journey." "With many miles still ahead," he added, pressing a kiss to her temple. Later, as Zane carried her across the threshold of their bedroom, a gesture he had specifically wanted to include, celebrating the physical ability that had once seemed impossible, Zanelli felt a sense of completion that transcended the day's formalities. The room held memories of their evolving relationship, her first night helping him as his caretaker, the evening bathing session that had transformed their connection, countless conversations that had built understanding between two people from vastly different worlds. Now it would hold this new memory, their first night as husband and wife. Zane set her gently on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Beyond measure," she replied, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw, "though I'm still trying to process how we got here from where we started." "I know exactly how," he said, drawing her closer. "Our story began with a contract of necessity, but it will continue as the greatest testament to love this world has ever known." As their lips met in a kiss that held both passion and promise, Zanelli realized that the most miraculous aspect of their journey wasn't Zane's physical recovery. Remarkable as it was, the true miracle lay in two wounded souls finding healing in each other, creating connection that transcended circumstance, building love that had survived separation and judgment to emerge stronger for the challenges overcome. The door closed on their private celebration, marking not an ending, but a beginning. A new chapter in a story that had defied expectations from its first unlikely page. What had started as desperate employment had transformed into partnership founded on respect, strengthened by adversity, and now sanctified by vows that acknowledged the extraordinary path that had brought them to this threshold and the journey that stretched beyond it into their shared future.